Hey guys, it's Quana back again with another review. Hope you guys are doing awesome. So I am going to be recapping today's spoiler review of The Handmaid's Tale Season 5, Episode 5, entitled Fairytale. This episode was very short. First of all, only about 43 minutes long. But it's definitely moving around some chess pieces and some predictions that I made in my last video, which you should definitely watch. If you haven't watched that one, go watch that one first and then come back for this one. But some predictions that I've been making since the beginning of the season are, I believe, coming to fruition. So in this video, I'm going to recapping what happened on this episode, talking about my theories for what's going to happen in the next episode and in the rest of the season, and talking and linking some things that maybe have already taken place, because I definitely think there's some nods to some things that have already happened in the past. But before we get started, do me a favor and click the subscribe button down below. And if you like this video and the other Handmaid's Tale content that you find on my page, give this video a thumbs up. And now let's go ahead and get into the recap. Again, spoilers for episode 5 entitled Fairytale. I don't know that they meant that in a literal sense, or if they just meant in the idealistic life being a fairy tale kind of way. But this really gave me two fairy tale vibes. A lot of Hansel and Gretel type stuff going on in June's storyline, and a lot of Rapunzel stuff going on in Serena's storyline. And we're going to talk about that, but I want to start with Serena's storyline and then end with that very shocking ending with June and Luke. So we start, and really the episode starts with June, but then we quickly get to Serena. Serena awakens in the Wheeler household, where she is finding refuge after the protesters have showed up at the Gilead Center. She wakes up, it's this very idealistic home. She's in this mansion estate. It's very picturesque. And as we see her descending the stairs, I can't help but think that there's a lot of throwbacks to season 1 and season 2. A lot of times we've seen these the show use this staircase motif and symbolism with the handmaids descending downstairs in the shape of an eye and the shape of circles. Here we have Serena, and it's in a box shape, but it's very reminiscent to the very first time that we see June descend the staircase from where her room was in the attic of the Waterford home. She arrives downstairs and is very quickly greeted by their maid. Can't help but notice you have a black lady as the maid. It's 2022, but I definitely think that while it would have been nice to have not seen a black housekeeper, because it was already set forth with the previous Serena and June storyline in Gilead with Rita, I definitely felt like there were some allusions and some callbacks to Rita, because I felt like Rita was one of the very first people that we saw in the Waterford home that June spoke with. And then she speaks with the guy who brought her guard from the Gilead Center. I don't remember his name. She speaks to him briefly, talks about, being there, getting back to the center, and he's kind of placating her, assuring her that everything will be fine. Mr. Wheeler's given instructions, and you definitely can see there's a shifting of loyalty and a shifting of where his orders are coming from, where before his orders were coming from Serena, now he's getting his orders from Mr. Wheeler. She goes into the dining room. There's this beautiful spread of breakfast where she and Mrs. Wheeler begin the pageantry of oh no, dear, you should not have done this. Oh, it was not trouble at all. Of course, we know she didn't make any of this food. And they sit down to eat, and we get to hear that, Mrs. Wheeler is enamored with Gilead, and she's definitely sipping on the sauce of, believing that a woman's place is, in the home, just being decorative for her husband. She doesn't want to get involved in anything that's the business side of things. But we find out that Serena's going to take this phone call, get this phone call from Lawrence, and she invites Mrs. Wheeler to join in. Mrs. Wheeler does not want to have any part of it. And when she answers the phone, not only is it Lawrence, but it is also Putnam, I don't even remember his first name. That guy just gives me the complete EBGBs. And the way that Serena greets, hello, Joseph, like she's still trying to pull in our boy Lawrence and trying to see if he will, you know, scoop her up and marry her so that she can get back to Gilead. I think he's definitely, at this point, we know now that he's toying with her as well. But he very quickly alerts her that they're not alone so that she doesn't say anything that would put either one of them in a compromising situation. She comes up with this new plan for Gilead where she wants to put forth, you know, Gilead, the Gilead Center. Well, really what they do, and she wants to establish like it based around the idea of fertility. Let's focus in on fertility. That is what the people want. Not to mention the fact that, you know, in the episode, she has this almost like a baby shower type moment, again, called back to episode 1, where all of these infertile women are there and they're all wanting to touch her belly, and she gives me so much hope, and all of these things fawning over her. She's like, that's how we have to win over the world. We have to give them what they want, and what they want is babies. And if we sell them on babies instead of focusing on Gilead so much, that's how we'll win them over. Putnam is not on board with, first of all, this woman telling him what to do. But Lawrence actually sees the wisdom in this. It's kind of scary because you can kind of definitely tell like he doesn't want to dismiss it because it's smart. But at the same time, he's actively working to shut down Gilead as well. So he can't like pitch this, you know, and make it seem like it's a good idea. So Putnam very quickly dismisses Serena and clicks off the phone. You can start to see that she's putting the pieces together of like them not wanting to listen to her because she's a woman, but she's still hoping that she holds some clout. Eventually, Mr. Wheeler comes home. She tries to go out to the grounds, and there's this woman there who brings her flowers, and they won't let her go to the gate. She's definitely, like at this point now, a prisoner. And what's really interesting is I think at this point, if she doesn't realize it already, but they are definitely giving out some like Rosemary's Baby type vibes. I definitely think at this point now, with the way that Gilead is being dismissive toward her, not really wanting to talk with her, the way that she's kind of being held captive in the house, it's really giving me Rapunzel type vibes. She's trapped in the tower, and she is definitely on her way to becoming the Wheeler's handmaid. And maybe not in the traditional sense, because we keep getting these flashbacks of Serena when Gilead first started, looking at these children who've been taken away from their parents, and her and Mrs. Putnam kind of talking about these children as though they were animals, not knowing which one was a good one, what kind of home they came from before, which ones were good stock, all of these different things. It was really a grotesque scene. And then ultimately talking about, well, this is better or more appealing than Handmaids. And then eventually, you know, being led and talked to her first kind of meeting with Aunt Lydia, picking out a handmaid for her home, and her reticence about wanting to have a handmaid. So we get to see that she wasn't always on board. I think we knew this from jump, that there was like an original plan that she had for Gilead, and the men definitely like went off script, and she doesn't really want to be on board with this, but at the same time what she wants is a baby. And so what she's saying about selling this in fertility and with babies makes a lot of sense. Lawrence also has his own vision. We don't really know much about it, but he's calling it New Bethlehem, and it has something to do with taking in people who were from Gilead or from America and became refugees somewhere else and letting them back into the country. I would not be surprised if this is attached to some type of effort to bring down Gilead on his side, but it seems as though he and Serena's vision could kind of maybe work together. I definitely feel like there's no true redemption for Serena, but I definitely feel as though the show is going to be moving toward a direction of using her plight in order to put her in a position to help more people get out of Gilead or to bring down Gilead. Because ultimately, the show's been kind of pitting her and June, even in the thumbnail for the show, the poster, promotional poster, it's her and Serena. or excuse me, Serena and June against each other. But Serena is not Gilead. And now we see more than ever that she is powerless without Gilead. She is trapped and she's going to need the help of those on the inside to get her out of her situation as well. What's really gave me those Handmaid's Tale vibes is when Mr. Wheeler comes home and she's praying and she gets up and she goes to talk to him and says, he's like, oh, I would talk with the commanders and they're going to go forward with your idea, but don't worry about it. We got it handled. Don't worry about it. You just take care of yourself. Don't worry about it. Most pregnancies end in bed rest. Don't worry about it. Like kind of be very dismissive. And then he gives her these prenatal vitamins. We don't know what they are. I'm sure they're not going to hurt the baby per se, but it definitely gave me some Rosemary's Baby type vibes of like them maybe knocking her unconscious and taking her somewhere until she has that baby. And she very reluctantly, and I missed it, so I couldn't tell if she actually swallowed the pill, but she definitely sees and is peeping what's up. So it's going to be very interesting to see just how far into the direction of perhaps like Handmaid Serena the show is going to lean. And then we get to June's storyline, and I call June's storyline Hansel and Gretel because she and Luke, she wakes up from this dream of Hannah. All of the shows have kind of started with these visions and these dreams and these flashbacks of June and June's life prior to where she is now in the state of things. And so she has this dream of Hannah. And so next we see her in the car with Moira and Luke. They're headed to go meet up with Lily and Mayday so they can find out more about the color purple and what that means, that Hannah might be a wife in training. Like, what does this mean? And we see that the Canadians are protesting the presence of the refugees. I love the direction that the show is going in terms of showing the realities of being a refugee and this idea that like the Americans would just be so wholeheartedly accepted, like maybe at first, but eventually as resources become scarce, like people will turn on people. And we get to see that it's putting the refugees' lives more at risk, which I think means we're going to see a new side of things, probably from Moira and Mayday, as they tackle that element of life life during Gilead, life in Gilead, outside of Gilead, I guess. But ultimately, like the guy that they're supposed to meet up with to get the information can't come, and so Luke is like, finally, like he listened to Serena and he's like, you know what? I got to be the man in this situation. I'm going to go ahead and go. I'm going to meet up with him and get the information. And so June is like, I'm going to go. At no point in time does anybody mention Nicole. I don't know. I really was like, is somebody going to mention Moira, you taking care of the baby? Like if something happens to us, you got her. I mean, obviously, yes, that's her godmother. She has her. But that was just very like, no conversation about one of us staying behind. So they both decide to go. And there's a little homage to Prince there because they exchange passwords. Lily tells them the password is beret. And we see them walking through the woods, finding their way, making their way to no man's land. They meet up with this guard. We find out his name later is Jaden. And he says raspberry. And so the punchline is raspberry beret, which of course is the Prince song. Ironically, he's young. He's probably like 20 at most. He would not know that reference in a post-Gilead world. And we kind of find out later. He doesn't want to give them the information about what he calls the plum school until they go with him. Bad idea, bad idea, bad idea. And by now you would think June has been in these kind of situations enough to know and to sense danger. But they follow him anyway because they want this information, which ends up being such loose information that he passes on to them that unless we get a payout later, I'm going to be uniquely ticked off about it because like it was such little information for the risk that they put themselves in. He ends up taking them to this like abandoned arcade / bowling alley where he like hangs out whenever he's on guard in the woods. He exchanges the bags with them that they have to get out to Mayday. And he's like, oh, you can't leave right now. He gives them a flash drive that has information about the plums. And he says, the plums, that's the color that's what we call the girls who are going to be wives. They go to wife training. They learn how to run a household is all he says. And he says, and they're not there long. They get married pretty quickly. And Luke is like, but she's 12. And he's like, yeah, sorry, it's not my idea. It's just that's the way of it. He was like, but if she was still in purple, then she's good. She's still probably there. She hasn't been, married off yet, so she's okay. Um, One would think, perhaps being that she is a commander's daughter, that maybe they would let her reach maturity of like maybe 16. So maybe they have like maybe we have a countdown of like 4 years. I don't know. But the show only has one more year left. So we're going to get answers very quickly about whether or not Hannah is going to get married off. And then he and Luke proceed to bowl. Now, this is a weird sequence because we're in the midst of war and you're stopping to take time for bowling. And I have read enough dystopian novels, watched enough dystopian television to know that whenever you think that you have free time, you actually don't, and you are marching yourself closer to death. They proceed to bowl, and then Jaden says he can't really remember, but he thinks he used to like bowling, and apparently Luke loved bowling. And so they're like, what? You don't remember your life before Gilead? I would imagine, given Hannah's age, that Gilead has been established for about 7 years now, like as official, like when they went on the run. Probably 8 years or so from like the first shutdown attack of DC that we saw in the flashbacks from like season 2, and then 7 years since then. That's what I'm gonna say is probably our timeline. So he can't remember because he was probably like a preteen, and it's just not enough life experience. Like all of that would have kind of faded away. He probably remembers some things. And so he talks about not remembering whether or not he liked it, but he thinks he used to go bowling with his dad. And then there's a piano there, and Luke starts to play. And he's playing, Yankee Doodle, Oh Susanna, and then finally he lands on Al Green, Let's Stay Together. OT has a nice voice, not the best, but decent. And it was a really sweet moment. I don't care for we're stopping having fun and romantic moments during high stakes life or death situations, but it was a cute moment for them because they get to dance to Let's Stay Together. And Jaden, I did get a chuckle when Jaden asked him if he wrote that song, and then he lies and says yes, because of course this boy has never heard Let's Stay Together because he's never really heard music before. So sad, really, when you think about it. Finally, nightfall ends, and he's going to take them back to the border. And the whole time, the suspense is building because it's going to go bad. We don't know if this guy is on the wrong side of things, if he is who he says he is, if he's going to turn them over, if he's already put in word that he has them. We don't know what. But we all know, having been fans of the show long enough, it actually would have been worse a surprise if they had made it to the border unscathed. But alas, that's not what happens. Jaden stepped on a mine, and at first he's trying to like be calm, cool, collected, like, okay, it's okay. And they're slowly backing up and they're like, what do we do? And he's like, I got it under control. And then booyah, up to smithereens. It really reminded me of that one episode of Grey's Anatomy, but he didn't blow up into parts. He just lost a limb. They stopped to try to help him. And I got thinking, was someone surely heard that explosion? You need to run. And then he starts to tell them to run, and they still don't run. Like, at what point are we going to realize when people say run, run? I just feel like, I don't know that happens in real life, and it just feels like such a trope that it does happen so frequently in television. But alas, they finally start to run, but it's too late. Gilead is on their tail, and they're running, and OT is running, and Elizabeth is running. Well, Luke and Jude are running. They're running, and they both get grabbed, get caught, and get pulled in separate directions. We don't know who has who. Are they both in the same place? Are they in the Gilead side of things? We don't know who has them. Was it the rebels? Is it Gilead? We don't know. All we can do is hope that the people who have them are the rebels, and they just don't know who they are, and they'll be just questioned. Fingers crossed. But that was how the episode ended. And so unfortunately, our little Hansel and Gretel stayed too long at the gingerbread house and did not survive. And right now, our Rapunzel, she's still locked up in her tower. And there is no prince to come and save her. So unless Joseph is our prince. You know, wouldn't it be interesting if the whole show is saved by Commander Lawrence? But I definitely think now we have the trajectory of this is how Luke and June end up in Gilead, because we always had to end up in this position where for us to follow June as our protagonist for one more season, she has to get to Gilead, or she at least has to get to being a part of the main action. She cannot just remain in Canada forever. I definitely think in the scene with Moira and Lily, they're definitely teasing some sapphic vibes there where they're going to end up together and potentially be raising Nicole. And I am too nosy, so I have full spoilers because I know what happens in Testaments. So I definitely think the show is pulling in some of the Testament stuff so that that book is a viable connection, and these pieces work in tandem to the universe that is The Handmaid's Tale. Because The Handmaid's Tale ends at season 1. The show is like the continuation, but the bridge between Handmaid's Tale and Testaments. And so I think that they're not going to deviate too far. They're setting things up to where that could still be a true narrative. But yeah, so I definitely think our girl Serena, the girl we love to hate, and she deserves what she gets coming, but she's definitely going to end up in red at some point in time. I definitely see that happening. I hope we don't see June in red again. I don't need to see June in red again. But I definitely think June is going to become a spy. So I'm really knocking on wood that the people who have her are rebels, and they're going to use her or Luke perhaps to spy. But we'll see what happens on next week's episode. Let me know down below in the comments. This was a very short episode, so let me know, did you enjoy it? I've heard some rumblings online about people starting to kind of not enjoying this season, but I feel like this is one of the funniest seasons. For as much as you can find humor in a show about a totalitarian government that restricts women of all of their bodily rights and autonomy, for as much as you can do that, the writing in terms of that has been very good. Where there are times I wish that there was a little bit more movement and a little bit more dialogue when they give us those lighthearted moments, or when they find ways to kind of distract us from the depravity of what's happening. It actually works really nicely. So let me know down below in the comments what you thought about this week's episode, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Until then, toodles!